Hello, my name's Martin and this is Strat Chat, and today this is a special episode because I happened to notice that there was a developer's diary on Roads to Power. It's the first of two parts about the administrative government, which is going to be the default government type for the Byzantine Empire. So I'm just going to go through a few of the things that I noticed and a few of my own thoughts. First thing I wanted to say before we kind of look at the sort of individual slides and pictures and things is that this sounds to me like it is something that's going to be really, really good for managing larger empires. And although the Byzantine Empire is the only one that begins with the administrative government type, feudal and clan governments are going to be able to adopt it, presumably certain criteria are met. And I think the impression I get is that it'll be much more suitable for some of these sort of larger realms. You know, I am myself starting as playing in India for a YouTube run. You know, if at some point in the future I'm able to unify those three big Indian empires and essentially unify all of India, maybe swapping to administration government type when it becomes available might be a really, really good thing to do. Also sounds like a lot more scheming. It's going to become very, very difficult for vassals to fight each other. I'm not even sure that they're able to fight each other at all. But there's going to be a lot more scheming. There are going to be a lot more types of schemes. It's going to be a much, much more intricate game of the kind of the politics and the scheming going on within the empire to try to get influence and power. And finally, it sounds like there's going to be a lot more micromanagement. So let's have a look at a couple of the slides, and I'm just going to pick out some of the main things that I noticed. So this is the first slide with a significant amount of writing, and I think the key thing here is that the emperor, the Byzantine emperor, is going to be at the top of a kind of a pyramid of people who are going to be governors, and he's going to be able to select who those governors are. Now, this system works alongside the normal system for advisors, councillors. So, for example, lots of people within the realm will be members of a house. Apparently, you don't have to own land, you don't have to be a count, a vassal, a baron, or anything like that necessarily. But if you're a member of a noble house, then you are eligible to take on one of these things and be one of these governors. And there are different types of governors. I think there are 6 in total. And the Byzantine Emperor is going to be able to place people in those. So, like I said before, one of the things they point out in the third paragraph here is that the vassals will not be able to war against each other, but they are going to have a lot more tools available to them, which I think we'll see later on in this developer's diary. Many, many more schemes to be able to use against one another. When people are governors, they're not able to join as dissolution, so we get this right, they're unable to join or create independence and dissolution factions. This makes it much, much easier. Now, this idea of having like all 3 Indian empires together and forming kind of like one huge, huge realm, that's going to be much more possible because you can take your most powerful vassals and slot them into governor positions and make yourself much, much more secure. So, in this game, traditionally, the way that you get titles is through, you get marriages, you can fabricate claims, and then you fight for them. That's the most common way for people to gain land. Well, that's not going to be the way it's going to be with this. You're going to have these different ways of scheming against your rivals. You're going to be able to get hooks against your peers, and you're going to be able to use influence to sway the emperor to your side. So there's a whole new kind of series of mechanics, and I think this idea of influence actually becomes a new currency in this DLC. And they're very, very clear in that bottom paragraph there, yet Byzantium is the only place that will begin the game with administrative government type, but that feudal and clans can take that on board as well. It says here, if they can strive to surpass Byzantium. So this governor system is obviously critical to this new DLC, and I think the idea is that you will get assigned to land, but you don't own the land in the way that you typically do in a game of Crusader Kings 3. You are in a sense managing the land on behalf of the realm and on behalf of the emperor. So if you are the Byzantine emperor, you're picking people who are going to work that land on your behalf. Alternatively, if you're a member of a noble house, you might get selected to to take over the job of running one of these kind of like royal estates almost. This is far less secure. These positions are far less secure than actually being a count and actually essentially owning the land. So you can be dismissed. Somebody else could get selected for it. You could drop out. You can give it up for yourself. So it's a temporary arrangement. It's like a job, I suppose, that you are kind of like being given. And of course, this allows there's the other system where you can have landless characters. So, for example, you might lose your governorship of a particular place, and at that point become landless. But you're going to be able to play as a landless character for some time in the game. So it isn't necessarily the end of the game in the way that it was before this DLC came out. So this idea about landless characters, I'm just going to read the paragraph to you, so we're all kind of like hearing it together. So landless nobles are made playable with a new type of title, the noble family title. So this new title is a duchy tier title typically held by the house head, and you can draw comparisons to how mercenaries or holy orders are set up. They exist with a duchy tier title held by their respective leaders. This is an important caveat to mention here. This means that if you don't have a noble family title, you'll be unable to play as a landless noble. You'll almost always be playing as the house head. However, if you find yourself in an extremely rare case that you aren't, we've made the decision to create a cadet branch, much easier for admin. So as the player, you can take this at essentially any time if you aren't the house head. And doing so will give you a new noble family title, allowing you to keep playing even if you lose your land. So I'm not quite sure what people will be able to do with that land, but no doubt we'll find out more about this kind of landless playstyle as things progress. So I thought this was a really, really interesting picture. So you've got Basileus at the top there. So he's obviously the head of the Byzantium. I don't know whether his name is Basileus, but it's nearly always Basileus, isn't it? So there he is at the top. You'll see there are some icons beside him. Not quite sure what those mean, but we can see that this is clicked onto noble families. So you've got House Komnenos, Basileus. There we go. Basileus Manuel. So he's actually the emperor. So he's always at the head. And I think there are going to be 5 or 6 governors, plus the actual emperor himself. So he's always excluded from. There's always 5 or 6 governors below him. You've got some other households here: House Kontostephanos, House Angelos, and no doubt we can go to their estate and have a look at it. Perhaps there's an icon there to the right of them. You see the family rating. I'm not sure what that means, but that may well be their influence. That's something that obviously we'll perhaps find out as we go through. So powerful families. And on the left-hand side, there's another tab there, themes. Now, I think those are the governorships that you're able to put these people into, but I'm not sure about that. But that certainly seems to be how it's working. So every house, and we've got these different houses in this administrative government displayed here. So every house will have, and I think we now know what this sort of family rating is. The family rating basically shows the level of power that they have in that administrative system, and you'll have normal, powerful, and dominant families. Dominant being the most important. Now, this is really important because individual characters will come and go. They'll die, they'll become landless, etc. But the house can be remain a kind of a dominant force in your society. For example, the family goes on, the family's importance perhaps continues. Being a powerful family entitles house members to several benefits. So only powerful and dominant families, for example, can depose and subsume governorship schemes. They get a discount to promoting candidates in the new succession type, which will be discussed next week. And they're better at political scheming. It's also easy to be made co-emperor, which is again something that we're going to be discussing in a later developer's diary. So essentially they're giving us a bit of a hint of some of the schemes that people are capable of doing, that the player will be able to do. And being a powerful family means that you've got more influence, I suppose, and you're more able to do these things. So the dominant families, they have the same advantages of powerful families, but more so. Apparently they're very, very difficult to dislodge once they get themselves into governorship positions. They can get governor positions more easily because it's much cheaper for them to do the schemes and things that they need to do. So they become very, very powerful, really, really sort of challenging almost the power of the emperor. They're also, dominant families are much more likely to actually inherit the throne, the emperor's throne. So there's a maximum of 5. In fact, there's always 5 powerful families in the realm, and they need to have a kind of a rating above a certain threshold in order to become one of those. Each of those powerful families gets a special attribute to kind of give them all a little bit of different flavour. So you might have a kind of a warlike a family perhaps, and you might have one that's a bit more of a political meddler. And you can see down the list there that you can see a series of different attributes that families can have. And I think if you are one of these powerful families, it kind of looks like there's a mechanism for changing it. So you might want to change it from time to time. Here we've got confident schemers is highlighted. We can see that gives the liege additional scheme, a maximum hostile schemes +1. So in most instances you can only do one scheme at a time. So somebody, a family with this attribute, their liege, the head of the family, would have +1, be able to do 2. But every member of that house will also have these advantages: hostile scheme power +2%. So that's a small increase in the speed of schemes, but also hostile scheme potential up 10%. Now that language is a little bit different to the language we normally use for schemes, so I don't know if there are going to be significant changes there, or whether that really is just slightly different language for the things that we're used to. So this is going to give an awful lot of flavour to the realm, and bearing in mind that these families, although individuals come and go, these families, these houses will endure. You'll build a stronger and stronger relationship over time with these families. I think this is a really fascinating aspect of the DLC. So we've got a new currency in the game for administrative government types, and so for example we have here, you can see that this particular house, individual house, not sure, has influence of 810. That's the amount that has been kind of saved up, and you can see that they get 1.84 per month. That influence you're able to spend in order to do different things. So this is a whole new kind of currency that we're going to have to start getting used to if we want to play administrative empires. And in fact you can go up through levels just as you do with prestige, imperious, authoritative, controlling, persuasive, influential, impotent. They seem to be going in the opposite direction to the way I was expecting them. So impotent obviously is the weakest level of influence, I suppose. And imperious obviously is going to be the highest. So the things they say you can use to get influence are your position in the realm, your skills at manipulation, your success with schemes. All of those will influence how much influence that you have. But there are other things. Governor trait. So you can see here you've got a track. If you are a governor, if you're acting as a governor character, you've got a trait sort of experience chart here, going from 0 to 4. So being a governor, certain things no doubt will give you points which will allow you to move up. So each of those tiers, level 1, 2, 3 and 4, give you a bonus to your influence, your monthly influence. You can see here at levels, but at level 1, which this person is not yet at, you get +1 stewardship and +1 influence per month. Presumably at level 2 there would be even more. So it's quite an interesting way of gaining stewardship as well. Well, that might depend on the kind of governor that you are, and I don't know. So one of the ways that the Liege Council has changed is that you also gain influence. It looks like quite a lot of influence, +2 per month for being on the council, and that's in addition to the normal benefits that we would normally expect to get. Alliances become useful, alliances within Byzantium. So you can form alliances with other house heads, and the more house heads that you have alliances with will increase the amount of influence that you receive. So estate upgrades. The primary building of your estate offers compounding influence bonuses as it gets upgraded. Primary building of the estate, as it gets upgraded, is going to give you more influence. So here we've got the example of guest chambers, and you've got here different levels 1 to 6. This particular building is on level 2. A number of different advantages there, but monthly influence goes up by 4%. So this is a way of stacking some of that influence by buying buildings within your estate. Then you're holding upgrades. So of course you're used to holdings, so that's nothing new, but certain buildings will increase the amount. So you've got here Murex Fisheries. I don't know that I've come across Murex Fisheries, so that might be a completely new building, but you can see there is plus 0.10 a month influence to the holder of this. Relatively small amount perhaps, but that's another place where it comes from. So that's how you get it. So let's think about, well, let's see if we can find out what we can do with it. Okay, so firstly, we can demand council position. Now there are other ways that we've always been able to do that, but as we can see here, this will cost 500 influence, and you get a sense of whether or not your liege will accept it. In this case it's about 50-50, but might be a good use for that influence, especially as you get some influence back if you become on the council. You can also use it to force people to join your factions. Now the traditional way of doing this is to try to get hooks on people, I think, isn't it? And then you can normally get them to join your faction. Well, this gives you an alternative to that. This would cost 250, and you can use that influence to get this chap to join your faction. So Strategos Leon, and I think Strategos, I'm not quite sure if that is Count or Duke or maybe Governor, I'm not quite sure. So some of the language here is not, I'm obviously not familiar with at the moment. But if you've saved up a fair bit of influence, and perhaps you know that you're going to want to be doing a faction later on in the game, you could be saving up for quite some long time, you might be able to bring quite a few dukes in, and sometimes it takes a long time getting those hooks, and it can be fiddly and it's uncertain. This looks like quite a certain way of bringing people in, a little bit like kind of bribing people into murder schemes. So this is interesting. So trying to get people to join an alliance with you, so you propose an alliance, well, you know, they might not accept. But you can see there in the kind of the pop out there, exerting influence plus 20% based on your level of influence. So your level of influence is going to be taken into account when you're trying to get somebody to agree to an alliance. Here we've only got a 9% chance of him agreeing. So not quite sure how, but obviously here the character is spending 100 influence in order to propose the alliance, or does it make it more likely that he's going to accept it? I'm not 100% sure how that mechanic is working, but certainly influence is something that you can use to get somebody to be more likely to form an alliance. I'm assuming this is only with families within the Byzantine Empire, or at least within the administrative empire. So interestingly, petitioning your liege costs influence instead of prestige, but in other respects it seems quite similar. You can't see the choices there. Those are the decisions and contracts. Well, that's interesting, because I think those words and contracts is new. But so this is a slight change to the feudal and clan systems. So again, not quite sure in what way they'll get improved here, but you can use influence to bolster. They use that word bolster governance. So I think you have a target, you spend some influence, and you can do one of these things: divert resources, grease palms, burnish reputation, support bureaucracy, or remove obstacles. And in some way each of those would improve the position of your governor, boost them, bolster them in some way. Of course we can't see at the moment what those boosts and benefits might be, but boosts and benefits no doubt we will find out about as we get nearer to release, to launch, to publication. Now this is the bit that I've actually kind of been a little bit excited about, actually, because I quite like the idea. I'm very, very conscious in medieval times, if I'm a count, even probably almost a duke, I'm going to be quite concerned about the detailed management of my property. And this is perhaps allowing us to kind of like zoom in just a little bit more on the actual family and their possessions, estates. So visually, it's kind of interesting. Apparently, it varies depending on where your estate happens to be located. I guess whether it's in desert or farmland, etc. You can see that there are a number of buildings here on Komnenos' estate. You can see that there are guard lodgings, market squares. There's the estate. Now that's the main building, I think, the central building of the estate. Fermenting vats and a monastery. And no doubt there are perhaps other buildings that you can build as well. So I think that part of the reason they've done this is this can become like a kind of a permanent home for your character. And I think that would be really, really nice thinking about that, being able to think of your character in that building with those buildings around it, etc. I think that's quite a nice feature. But it also means that if you become landless, you still have a kind of an estate, this estate. The buildings you can build obviously bring various advantages, but it also unlocks certain interactions and decisions, perhaps. And one of the primary sources of increasing your influence is through the estate window. So the head of each house has an estate, just the head of house only. You can become quite powerful just with this, according to this. Only the family head can do, the dynasty head can build these buildings. And the developers are saying they're keen to have lots and lots of variety of options, so you can kind of develop in different directions, I suppose. We can see here that the guard lodgings, I can't see what level that building has been built to. I suppose I could look at the last page. If it's the same as that, it's level 2. But you can see the effects. Bodyguard aptitude is better. House heads can ask for knights through the request as house head interaction. Each level of this building increasingly reduces the success chance of hostile real estate schemes. So raid estate schemes. Now I don't know what raid estate schemes are, but obviously there's going to be some sort of a scheme where you can raid the estates of other house heads. And I get building up the guard lodgings is going to make you a little bit safer to that. Okay, so raids and sieges are slightly less likely to take characters in the estate as prisoners, and that's one of the worst things, isn't it? When you get sieged down and you know there's a raid and you end up getting taken prisoner, or your primary heir or something like that. So the guard lodgings are going to give you a bit of protection about that, and presumably the higher you go up, the better that level of protection will be. Also improves travel safety in the area and also makes you slightly more secure against hostile schemes. So there's a kind of little suite of benefits there, and I think fine-tuning them to your, what it is that you want, is going to add a really, really interesting level to this game. So in terms of what can we build on our estate, we've got Paleologos estate here. So there's apparently 2 things. The first of those is buildings. At the beginning, the first thing that you will have is your mansion, probably at level 1. It'll always be at least at level 1. I think depending on the culture it might be called a villa, and that is essentially your home. But at level 1 you'll have 2 other building slots, and you'll be able to build a range of buildings in those slots. Also, you'll be able to level up your buildings. So if you level up your mansion to level 2, you'll then have 3 slots. Level 4 you'll have 4 slots, or whatever. You can do the maths, and I think 5 is the maximum level. When you've got a fully leveled up mansion, you'll have like 5 slots. You have 5 different buildings, and the developers are really clear. There are going to be far more options available than 5. So you are going to have to make some decisions and think about what kind of buildings that you want. And each of those buildings has a kind of a tree, so you can develop in different ways. So you can see it here with the monastery. You've got level 1, level 2, level 3, and then it goes off in 3 different directions, and you can decide, I guess, in what way you want to develop it. So it's going to be really, really interesting to look at that. We've got monastery, level 4, unlocks commission icon decision, tax plus 0.6 a month, piety plus 0.3 a month, monthly piety plus 5%. So that would be the benefit, but presumably there would be a different benefit if you chose one of the other monastery level 4 developments. Here we got the same thing with a large warehouse. So here we got another example of a house head interaction. So if you have a large warehouse level 4, the head house can ask for a domicile building support through request as head of house interaction. So there's going to be a whole new range of interactions potentially, and I think the whole thing of kind of like looking ahead and being able to see what you might be able to do before you played this a few times is going to be really difficult and really interesting. But something I think is really good about this system is if you were to start, as I am later on today in India, for example, and you gradually build up a very, very large feudal realm, because India's predominantly feudal, isn't it? You could swap to this administrative system, and you've got a whole new range of things that you can start building and developing. And I think that's really, really good, because sometimes I think that the later game can be a little bit dull in the old game simply because you've kind of done everything and you're super powerful and you've maxed out everything. Well, this is going to be a whole new area that you could perhaps go in. Okay, the second thing that you can build in your estate is upgrades. Now, apparently, so I'm not completely clear in my head how this will work, but for example, in your mansion, you might have a number of slots which will increase as you increase the level of your mansion. But with those slots, nothing to do with the buildings around. Okay, these are things that are built within the mansion, within that building itself, and presumably it's sort of things that make that mansion better in some way. So you're going to be able to build a number of these buildings within buildings, or features within buildings, and they're going to have their own upgrade paths, and there are multiple routes through those upgrade paths. We've got an example here. We've got the mansion level 3, and all of this is not making any sense to me at the moment, but you can see how there clearly seems to be a range of ways that you can develop that mansion. So I think it's going to be really, really fascinating to explore this, and I'm very, very keen to have a go at it. So here's a really good example. So give us an example straight away. You could have a library. So there's you've got your basic mansion. You've got a slot for something to build within the mansion. You might go, right, we're going to have a library. So here's a library. So this is something that's going to improve education. It's going to improve your physician. There's a number of things, benefits that come. And again, you can see here with this library route, there are alternative routes of progression depending on what it is that you want it to focus on. I'm going to read this to you because this is interesting, right? The mansion can also be upgraded with a wine cellar. Of course it can. Who wouldn't want a wine cellar? Which in turn can be upgraded, a wine room, which in turn can be upgraded into a wine cellar. The upgrade unlocks a new activity option for feasts. Makes sense. Allowing you to spend some gold to gain influence for every guest who attends your feasts. Each level unlocks a corresponding level for the activity, allowing you to spend more gold for a larger amount of influence gained. Feasts are no longer just a means of gaining prestige and opinion, but become a much more central tool as you attempt to gain more and more influence. So it's really, really clever how they're bringing in the old systems from the very, very beginning of the game and kind of keeping them relevant, making them more relevant, perhaps. Yeah, you can have a vineyard and such like. So it's going to be really interesting to explore this stuff. So the vineyard typically gives you gold, but if you link it to the wine cellar, then you're able to kind of get gold and influence through the way the two work together. I don't know anything about modding. I don't even know anything about the mods. I don't use them. I had a look at a couple of them, and I think it's great, and I think it's the wonderful work that people do. I found the game of CK3 so far rich enough for me, but how wonderful it is that there are people that do mods. I really enjoyed actually playing around with the Game of Thrones mod about a year ago. Apparently all of this is very moddable, and it's going to be creating lots and lots of opportunities for those clever people out there to do amazing things. Altogether, I think this looks like an absolutely brilliant overhaul of the system, and I'm looking forward to episode 2 or part 2 of this developer's diary, which I think is just due out next week, and we'll have a read through that and see what we think of everything too. For the moment, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.